I'm a regular TouchDesigner user since about 2018, and I've mostly done GLSL development and busy creating any kind of, I don't know, physical simulations. Um, yeah, did a bunch of exhibitions, published some tools on the TouchDesigner forum. Happy to always hear any feedback on that and to see what people are doing with them. But yeah, I don't know. What else? Yeah, my background. So I studied mathematics, and now I'm a touch designer. So I have a background in mathematics and coding, and that's kind of where I'm coming from. Maybe so far about me.
All right, thank you. I think we can just kind of go to the other room right away. Because like right now we're kind of in the stage room, so only we can speak, or we can only pick ones that can speak. So we can move to Meetup room 1. So we all just go over there, and then I think we can start with questions right away. So I can just gonna write that in chat.
Bileam, one question. So we've put the link to this. Yes, okay. So the chat will show
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
room.
And I think they will also see on the left that we're all in that one. Should be fine.
Okay. Nice, nice. Great.
Alrighty.
Maybe
So
it helps if you mute your
yeah,
mic as long as you're not actually asking questions, because environmental noises are definitely coming in.
yeah. So welcome everybody to the other room. Um, we've never done this kind of format, so it's kind of new for me. If any of you has any questions, you can just go ahead and shoot them right away to either Joseph or me or the room in general, room at large. Mute JP as well. Yeah, let's see if people want to ask. Silence. There's these sounds we can play.
Yes, go ahead.
Well, too many questions at once. Okay, so I'm going to start asking a question to you, Joseph. What
I
inspired
think
you
there
to?
was this.
Ah, there was someone?
JB just started. JB just started asking a question. Sorry. Please come again.
Ah, there was something. Either in the chat or just here, like with voice, whatever you
Mm.
prefer.
Bileam, JB is saying maybe you muted him, but only for yourself, so you cannot hear him
Ah,
asking
okay,
the question.
yeah, right. Okay, so please go ahead.
Okay. And I was just wondering, maybe as a way to start the conversation, it's possible some people here on a touch designer experts, maybe they've worked with another visual, interactive visual program. And in both of your experiences, what what would you pick Touch Designer to do versus another program? What is it good for? What in your opinion it's the best at doing?
You want to start, Joseph, or should I?
Yeah, I'm happy to start on that. So honestly, since I've been using it so regularly since about like 5 years now, there are few things I wouldn't use Touch Designer for. So
Hmm.
obviously I centered my work around what I'm doing, but even for, I don't know, a lot of tasks that other people might use, for example, Excel for, or I don't know, maybe even Word. I'm using Touch Designer for so many things. Um, but the kind of the go-to reason to use Touch Designer is because you want to sketch something, and but most importantly, it's all about real time, I would say. So if you have any data coming in from somewhere and you want to get some kind of data out, might be visual. I think for most people it is actually visual, but also, I don't know, controlling lasers, getting out audio, and so on. That's definitely the reason, a good reason to use TouchDesigner. For me personally, I use TouchDesigner also a lot only as an environment to do GLSL coding. So that's my main usage of it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's kind of the thing at this point that I'm using TouchDesigner for literally everything. So I think it really excels at both like this kind of data conversion that you can convert from any type to any other type, and then also connecting the hardware to software and other software. So it's really like I think it's really good at being a kind of hub where everything comes together, and yeah, you can use it in combination with all kinds of other tools. And for me, I'm doing a lot of visuals as well, and you can connect it nicely to audio. So I think it can be used as a kind of Swiss Army knife for everything. But it really depends on yeah what you want to achieve. As soon as you go deeper into 3D, it's not that great anymore. But yeah. To everybody coming in here, please mute yourself. Yeah. Right. There's still a few people in the other audience. JB, can you maybe go over there and tell them to come here?
Yep, will do.
Thank you.
There's a question on the chat, by the way.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so I've been interested in learning TouchDesigner for a while now. I'm experienced with Adobe design tools, but nothing with coding. And I'm having difficulties understanding the language of TouchDesigner. My dream is creating audio-reactive visuals, but I honestly don't know where and how to start. Will I need supported software other than TouchDesigner? What is realistic learning curve would be for me? I would appreciate a lot if you have any tips. Yeah, I mean, there isn't really like the perfect path of getting into TouchDesigner, I would say. I think as a lot of you know, I've got this beginner course on YouTube, and there's also another one by Interactive Immersive HQ, and I think they're both like good starting points. And then there's also this new thing that Derivative released, which is their learning platform. I think that that's actually really, really cool, and I feel like maybe some people haven't even heard of it. I think it's, I'm going to check quickly. I think it's like learn.derivative. Yeah, I'm going to put that in the chat. You can check that out. I think that's a really good way. As for learning curve is highly dependent on your skill set already, like what you have, what you bring to TouchDesigner. So for example, Joseph has a high understanding of like mathematics and coding, and for me, I'm more on the music side of things and design. So we have like different backgrounds, and also depending on what you want to do, it's going to be easier or harder to learn. For sure, for me, it was like a lot of things, like you can do cool things very quickly, I feel like, but really understanding what's happening in like what you're actually doing, that can take years. For me, I was doing a lot of things in the beginning, and it worked, but like it took me for some things a lot longer to actually understand what I'm doing. So what's your take, Joseph?
Can actually just to, without saying too much about this, I think everybody needs to have their own experiences with TouchDesign, and maybe especially when you're coming from something like Adobe and you're used to that workflow. TouchDesigner definitely does have a different workflow from that, so you need to get used to that. And I always also actually recommend Bileam's tutorials on YouTube. That's a great start to get into TouchDesigner. And I think, yeah, have a look at that. If you have any access to that, go talk with someone who's already using TouchDesigner since a while, because I think that can give you a big head start if you have someone next to you who can tell you, wait, you did this wrong or whatever, and just shows you around. So yeah, quick answer from my side too.
Yeah, I remember when I got into TouchDesigner, or before I just asked around for like contact all kinds of people if they have any resources. So yeah, don't hesitate. I always say this, but like don't hesitate to reach out to people and ask them for help as well. So somebody wanted to say something to that question, I think. And if that is the case, you can just speak here if you want. And then there's another question. I'm getting into video manipulation with TD, and I was wondering what operators and concepts you can recommend for this. I already found that the time machine lets you do very cool things. Oh, that's a big question. um, Video manipulation can be, I mean, can be anything. Like obviously it's all tops, but even I was just doing these days, I was working with stops, so you can. Oh man, where do I start? Uh, I mean, I've got a lot of videos on this kind of stuff. That's kind of what I can say to that. You can do a lot with like texture instancing. I'm really really into that. I think that's a good sort of concept in TouchDesigner to look at. And then working with shaders if you have any kind of experience with that, feedback loops. I don't know. uh, Joseph.
Yeah, because this is a like ask me anything from me and you, Bileam. My honest answer to that is I'm the wrong person to ask this because I'm almost never actually using video footage. I'm always I'm like mostly starting from scratch and doing completely generative stuff. I have little to no experience with actually manipulating videos. So I need to pass on that question because I'm not the right
Yeah.
person to ask. But obviously there are tons of good tutorials. Um, Maybe someone can also just, I'm sure since we are becoming such a big group here, I'm sure someone has a great, just maybe, or I can share some tutorials on that.
Yeah, always feel free to just write that in the chat if you have the answer as well, or just talk here.
Yeah, and Linus02 asked about how to get into GLSL without any coding background. So I answered that in the chat. For me, the Book of Shaders is actually still the resource for getting into GLSL, because it's an interactive website. It starts really from scratch. Um, and you can like the great thing is that there's code up there, but you can like manipulate it in real time and see the results. Um, but yeah, I would generally recommend that, and then all the other resources you would find from there.
Hmm. But I personally feel like it's difficult to get into it without any coding experience. It might be good to generally check out some, I don't know, Python or something like that to also get a feel of how programming languages work generally. Do like a basic course or something, because GLSL is a bit odd, um, for me at least. But yeah, I also did the Book of Shaders, but I feel like that does give you a basis, but at some point I felt stuck. Um, yeah.
Maybe we can give a quick, just like, because Apache 20, you seem to have a limited 10 minutes and want to say something about learning in TouchDesigner. Feel
Yeah,
free to just unmute yourself and start talking here.
yeah,
Everybody's invited to not only write in the chat.
Can you hear me fine, right?
yeah,
Okay, yeah, there's a bit, it's a bit windy here, but whatever. So, like 10 really briefly, as someone who's going from more of a beginner into intermediate process, and especially if some of you here are like even like at a somewhat lower level kind of in the process of learning, some tips I can give you is first of all to build a kind of like a routine, at least like one day, one times a day, just open touch designer, even if you don't feel like doing a straight up 30 40 minutes tutorial from Lake Ackerman, go do a one of like 3 minutes one from acrylic code. There's a billion resources nowadays. There's like so many tutorial makers. It's impressive. There's way too many of them. It can be feel overwhelming. Just keep on searching. You'll find something that is gonna feel interesting. At it in a way or another, even if you don't fully understand the whole process of what is going on, you look at something and you're like, oh, I can connect this operator into this one if I do a certain shenanigan, or I can use this line of Python, to achieve a specific, necessity of mine in this project. So try to always do at least one tutorial or even a little project in a day. If it's not in a day, you can extend it to more. Like there's always like time to improve. But I definitely
Yeah,
say
thanks.
try to keep on doing that. Keep on building a routine for definitely for sure. find resources, find people who have the same passion as you, who are at your same level, kind of thing. Exchange information with them, because truly the community is just, it's so extended, and there's so many people willing to like share knowledge with each other. Even some of the bigger names, I found that you can just send them a message, ask him something, and they'll answer. Maybe not immediately, but because everyone has their own times. They'll
Yeah, this is
answer,
what this is about. That's what we hear.
and all of this kind of
Do you
thing.
have a,
Yeah.
yeah, do you have
So
a question on that as
Uh,
well?
I, I I didn't have a particular question, especially because I really don't have that much time. I gotta do like shenanigans for work. But yeah, I really wanted to tell everyone that, like, as someone who's found himself sometimes even struggling more at the beginning, well, especially with sometimes with code, sometimes with the visual, just keep on researching on something new. If you find you're struggling on a specific area, whether it's audio reactiveness, visual, just extend to something else. You can always come back to something that you didn't understand, and maybe sometimes it just happens out of nowhere. You're like, oh, I didn't understand this thing at the moment, but now because I have this new knowledge of whether it's Python, whether it's operator, whatever it is,
Yes,
now
totally.
I fully understand what I didn't understand before. So just keep it going, and you'll find your road. You'll find your way to get to whatever your goal is. Absolutely. And watch Bileam's tutorial. Absolutely. Watch Bileam's tutorial. They're truly magnificent in that matter.
Thank you.
But yeah, yeah, don't worry. So yeah, I gotta pop off. I really have tons and tons of work to do. But
Yeah.
as always, it's beautiful to connect with everyone, and good luck to everyone in your learning process.
Thank you, dude.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. Have a good one.
Good one for you.
Did you want to add something to that? Like, no.
I mean, frequent learning is obviously good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, and maybe one takeaway if, it would be to say you don't need to get started with a major project. Just get yourself used to the workflow of TouchDesign. But there has been a question in the
There's a
chat.
few, yeah. There's also some on the YouTube chat. So,
Oh,
yeah,
good. Yeah.
there's something about VJing, live sessions with TouchDesigner and Resonum. Can you recommend to use this combination to generate a workflow to create visuals, or do you have a better workflow just with TD to launch the visuals to some direct output to signal video and stuff with Resonum? Yeah, without Resonum. So yeah, that was that was a big project I was working on, and I'm gonna be working on that again soon. Building a VJ tool for just TouchDesigner. Generally, it's yeah, it's like a difficult topic because it's really quite some work to build something that runs well in real time, like a UI. I can share that link in here. Maybe you've heard about it. There's a few different tools. Um, what's it called? There was another really good one. Simple Mixer, I think it's called. And yeah, I personally I used to work with Resonum before TouchDesigner, like Resonum Ableton combination as well. For me, I prefer doing everything in TouchDesigner, as I said in the beginning, and I really want to keep on working on that tool. There's also a lot of people making just their own simple setup with there's also this thing called I'll look it up, like a scene changer, yeah. So that can be useful to just quickly set up your your project. But I think working with Resonum, a lot of people do that as well, and it can make a lot of sense to easily switch between scenes and stuff. Yeah, as I said, I prefer using TouchDesigner only, maybe in combination with Ableton. What do you say?
I don't have anything to add to that. I think like you are definitely the master of VJing between the two of us. That's for sure. I'm not so used to actually work with music, and I've never worked with Resolume before in a reasonable way, so not much to add to that. But I think the next question would be: is there a future of TD that doesn't involve coding? What's your opinion on that? Um, I I to some extent use TouchDesign as a coding environment. So um, there are tons of things that can definitely be done without code, but I end up doing them with code because it's kind of my language of choice. It's easier to express. But Bileam, maybe you can talk about that because as far as I know, you do code, but you're also like doing all your amazing stuff without too much code involved anyway, right?
Yeah. I don't know if there's gonna be a future without coding. Possibly. I mean, with all the AI stuff coming now, it feels like at some point you just need to type in prompts anyways. Which I don't know if I'm happy about that. But it's hard to say. I mean, I do code, as you say. I do it, but like more as an extension of my network, not as a basis like you or Alpha Moonbase, like Bileam, for example, basically just codes everything. I don't know. I can't imagine, and obviously they're thinking a derivative also about ways of implementing AI and stuff. So it's probably gonna, in the long term, move into the direction of being less with code and more with like, yeah, just giving orders pretty much.
Yeah. Just to move on, I think there are a couple of interesting questions coming up.
Yeah.
So Julian is asking about like maybe a good start or like how to begin a project that involves GLSL. I guess it's helpful if you're a beginner of GLSL. I heard from a lot of people that it helps to start from a project someone else had coded and try to understand their code, manipulate it to understand what it's actually doing, and start from there. And also, I think with code, it helps in yeah so much if you organize your thoughts beforehand, and maybe if you even just write it down on paper, the actual steps that you want the code to execute. Because once you have that kind of laid out, like if you really know what your algorithm is supposed to be doing, it's only a matter of getting the syntax right and understanding the programming language, as in the syntax of it. But if you already have the concept clearly in your head, that helps a lot. So maybe that's a good start.
I feel like all you said applies to TouchDesigner generally, not just shaders. Yeah. Would it be easier to understand TouchDesigner if we start with learning the basics of Python? If you're not familiar with Python, I'm not sure if like learning Python would help. I think yeah, I don't think so. I think it makes more.
I'd TouchDesigner first, and then
Yeah,
you
yeah.
Python if you need it.
Yeah, same here because I personally I was doing like web coding and processing and stuff before, so I had some understanding of coding, but like Python I completely learned through TouchDesigner actually. Like I'm not a Python expert, but you know it's very handy to have in TouchDesigner. But I would say just learn it when you need it at some point, and just look for the expressions or ask ChatGPT these days for what you need. But yeah, I don't think it will actually help understanding TouchDesigner. So there's Notch and DDDD as well. Joseph, what's your thoughts on that?
Haven't opened any of both ever,
Mm.
to be honest. And there's not. I still feel like I haven't explored TouchDesigner. Like there are still things I want to do in TouchDesigner. I'm not drawn towards changing, or like I'm always interested to see what other people are doing with them maybe, but I feel like it wouldn't really elevate my skills if I would go to another software. I don't see really that I like another real-time software. I'm definitely interested in for example Houdini, which definitely brings you to has a different purpose in a way. But I think VVV and Notch have a very similar purpose, and I'm just good in like TouchDesigner is more than enough for me on that end.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't touched V4, but I've tried Notch for, and I also used it for like one bigger project. But yeah, then I stopped using it mainly because of the payment around it, and then also it felt, it might sound stupid, but it felt sort of too easy. And there wasn't, it didn't feel so free as in TouchDesigner, because TouchDesigner you can just basically rebuild the whole software to your needs. You can pretty much change anything if you know how to, and I prefer that a lot. It's this open source kind of, I mean, it's not open source technique, but it's more of that approach in a way. And yeah, I also feel like I don't really need anything else at the moment, and the only thing I would be interested in is Houdini probably, but I really, yeah, that's a whole new world as well.
Okay, I like the question of Quentin.
Mm-hmm.
They're asking what's the best technique, trick, and TD you learned that elevated your visuals in the most impactful way. I think that's a great question to ask, and ask me anything, Bileam.
And a very difficult one to answer.
If you want to think about it, I have my answer.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I would actually say it took me, I think, more than 2 years before I realized that TouchDesigner has an built-in shadow workflow. I never realized that, but you can use a light, preferable a directional light to set up shadows in your rendering. And if you do 3D stuff, I mean, depends on if you actually do that in TouchDesigner, but for me, yeah, using good shadows actually changes, like gives so much more depth to the scene and everything. So I would say that's something that probably elevated my visuals in an impactful way.
Yeah, for me, I'm generally do a lot of post-processing as well to make things look organic and a bit more analog in a way. So things like Luma Blur can be really, really helpful to give a bit more depth and dynamics. And then things like using LUTs, LUTs, like basically filters. I also have a video on that. And then like just adding small things like noise, and then there's the palette with image filters like Bloom or something. I'm recently started using that more. I don't know. I usually have at the end of my network quite the extensive list of post-processing operators. All of these, and can be very simple ones. And there's things like emboss, which are kind of almost retro effect and making things look 3D. But if you change that a bit and like composite it and stuff, you can make really nice subtle 3D shadow effects as well, but just in a 2D realm. So all of that, and just experience, like after some time you develop more of a sense for aesthetics and what feels right. And then there's also the thing like with colors, it's sometimes a bit difficult to work with in TouchDesigner, so there's some like working with color palettes can really help. Picking up colors from outside of TouchDesigner, from like website tools, all of these things, are relevant, I would say. There's some on YouTube. I'm gonna quickly go for that. So, what is your tip for beginners who want to work like a pro? Go, Joseph. That's
tip for beginners who want to work like a pro.
Yeah.
I'm I don't know what that means. I personally don't feel like I work as a pro because I don't have a pro workflow. I'm not organized in how I work in that sense. And otherwise, I guess just keep, yeah, I don't know. If you're starting learning TouchDesigner, do what interests you the most so you get profound in a specific thing, because TouchDesigner is so widely open. Everybody does different stuff with it.
Yeah, for me,
Follow your passion, I guess.
professionality comes really just with experience, I would say. At some point, you know what tools you have to use to achieve what you want to achieve, and first knowing what you want to achieve as well. And then, yeah, basically really finding out or getting, like permissions and stuff for what you have to or want to achieve. And then being professional is, I guess, in one sense, just really knowing how to get there. And that just comes over time. And yeah, keep doing it. Keep working all the time. I think like if you stay at it consistently, you can build a sort of professional workflow. But I often still don't feel professional either. So I don't know. I don't know if there's that one point that comes where you feel professional. There was another one there because it's already been there. For real-time installation, is there a way to run the project by installing it like a Raspberry Pi? I don't have much experience with that. I know that you cannot install TouchDesigner on a Raspberry Pi. I would probably recommend
What's the
like
question? You
Arduino.
can run it on a
Like literally read like for a real-time installation, is there a way to run the project by installing it like a Raspberry Pi?
maybe Torren, who is also on this chat, can jump into that. But on another Discord, I recently heard that someone managed to get TouchDesigner running in Linux using some kind of emulation or so. So maybe if you go way in, you can actually run TouchDesigner on a Raspberry Pi. But also, depending on what kind of a live installation you do, like there are a few live installations I would do that would run on a Raspberry Pi because they're graphic intense and you need a proper machine for that.
Oh yeah, I think my friend Pete set up managed to port touch or just to like run. I think in some type of virtual environment, Linux or Windows like on a Linux environment, and then run TD through that. But I mean, is the question maybe more about like how to install a kind of permanent installation, or install like the difference between putting the project into the installation, not just like Raspberry Pi specific?
I don't know. It's just it's on YouTube, so let's see if they answer. Hi, by the way.
Hey, good to see you too.
I think we can move on, right?
Yeah, maybe whoever asked that question can be more precise on it, but maybe we also answered it. Thanks for jumping in there, Torrin. Greetings to New York.
There's a nice one here with inspiration and reference. So about the creative process, do you search for some reference or have some place to look for inspiration? Yeah, that's a very important thing. I actually, since like I don't know, for a year now, something, I just have this folder in my cloud where I just put in anything that inspires me, and that's a lot like on Instagram, other people's work, also just random things I see anywhere. So I just take screenshots of that and save it, and that's actually a huge, that's really helpful for me. Sometimes when I don't feel inspired, I just see, okay, this kind of artwork or a completely random thing inspired me. But it can be anything. Like sometimes I watch a movie and get inspired, or in nature. It's so many different things. Like all of life can be inspiration for me. But I feel like it's good to have one place where you kind of save your things, so you can look it up when you feel uninspired and you need some input. What do you say?
I don't have that kind of an organized inspirational folder, but that sounds amazing. Maybe I should do that. I feel like I'm most inspired when I talk to people
Mm-hmm.
who do similar stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Or like, yeah, it doesn't need, yeah, most inspiring is it if you can actually talk to someone and also ask further questions on it, but also, I don't know, looking at other people's work while they also, because I think I'm mostly interested often in processes behind something, algorithms, and curious about them and inspired
Mm-hmm.
by curiosity, or yeah, curiosity driven. So I'm often inspired by just talking to someone who solved a problem that I've been thinking about for a while, and then from there on, I kind of unlock a new skill set that will, oh my God, now that I know this, I can do that or whatever. So
Mm-hmm.
that often leads to new things. So yeah,
Yeah.
often people.
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing also for me when I try techniques or something. They can inspire me. Like, I just try random things, maybe from a tutorial as well, or just something that comes up from myself. And then in the process, I see sort of, okay, that could go in that direction, and then the process itself becomes the inspiration. So sounds
Yeah,
very
maybe
poetic.
also part of the beauty of TouchDesigner being real time is that it's so playful, and like
Mm-hmm.
you're also doing stuff wrong, and then you're inspired by what's coming out
Exactly.
of that, and just you can kind of go with the flow because there is a flow compared to other software. We just need to wait and wait and wait.
Yeah, I feel like that's a really good point. That like mistakes and errors and stuff can be inspiring as well and can push you in a certain direction, especially with feedback loops. I notice that a lot. So yeah. There's another question about V4, but yeah, Joseph and I both don't have experience with that, so we can't really answer that. Maybe somebody else in the chat can. When performing live visuals, what proportion of your workflow is live media or audio reactive? I am interested in learning and leaning towards the media aspect, but in your experience, does the client tend to prefer audio reactive patches? With the client, I can't really say. I haven't really built much for clients in this aspect, like maybe visuals and stuff, or I've performed myself, but I haven't really built much for clients where they have like some kind of system to use. I mean, I built this algorithm thing, but that involves kind of everything. For me, I noticed performing myself, I always like think about all the UI and stuff way too much. And when I actually perform, I just want to have knobs and I just want to look at the visual and not think about anything, but feel my way through physical knobs. So I think and that's also going to be the focus of my next version because I really want to make it focus on MIDI and physical input because I think that's still, when you're actually in the heat of performing, that's still the best thing to work with. So I'm also leaning towards the kind of MIDI side of things.
Yeah, I don't know if the question also is about, because I lately performed live with some musicians, and they are doing like analog synthesizers, and we also discussed if I should like use their voltage control or do it or like react to the audio, because I also had access to their MIDI data. And maybe the question is kind of about this: do you want to work like with the MIDI tracks you might get from the artist, or with the
Right.
audio tracks? So I would generally say if you have access to the MIDI,
Mm.
there are some drawbacks of maybe you don't. Yeah, I mean it's way more discrete than actually working with audio, but it's also that has pros and cons, and it's also way more precise if you actually want to do something so
Yeah.
strongly reactive.
Yeah, it's a bit strange working with like a music video in MIDI, but yeah, I've done that as well. Obviously, it's always a lot more precise, as you said, and also working with stems can be really nice. The person from YouTube answered, so they say, I mean, it's it's a real-time installation, and if there's any Raspberry Pi equivalent option rather than having a whole computer running on the background, and if so, how? Or any docs that you could direct me to, e.g., how we can do that for Max MSP. Is there any similar approach for TouchDesigner real-time interactive installation? I don't know.
So basically, yeah, the question is maybe what kind of a hardware could run
Yeah.
TouchDesigner on site if it's not too heavy. Yeah, not my question. I don't know.
Same here, but I think the equivalent in a way could be that you run TouchDesigner on a normal computer and just use a lot of Arduino. I think that can be, then communicate wirelessly or whatever. That could be, or it would be a cables, whatever. But yeah, I think that could be a way. But I haven't really heard of a perfect alternative for small computers or something. Also, not my expertise. Okay, so
So there's a long question
yeah.
by Varti in the chat, which boils down to once you actually kind of have some skill set and you feel like you do have the skill set to start exploring TouchDesigner, how do you actually start and overcome the blank canvas problem?
I do have a video in my beginner series on that, but for me, I do often start with projects I've already done, sort of, like especially coming to feedback loops. Or I did that for a while. I usually don't really have this like a problem of having a white canvas, and like I don't really do that anymore. I either like as I said, I have my inspiration folder, or I have some image in my head or a sketch or something, and then I try to create that. And then for me, like just through like my 4 years of experience of TouchDesigner, I usually have a starting point in mind, but maybe it's good to just think about, as Joseph kind of said about the GLSL, just make a sketch first, have sort of an aim, what you want to create, and then sketch it down. What parts, components could you need for that? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think having a clear image of what you want to create can really help, but then at the same time not clinging to it. I usually have a starting point, like that's where I want to go, and seldomly I actually end up there. Usually it's just there's something happens in the process, and after 3 hours I'm at a completely different point, and but I'm happy with it. So I think just start with anything, and maybe if you're completely lost, just take a project that you've already done, using tutorial as a starting point. These kind of things. I hope that helps.
Yeah, and also, yeah, I struggle to really answer that question. I think somehow TouchDesigner became this tool that I'm very familiar with by now, and if I open Touch, like it happens to me that I'm uninspired and I feel like, okay, I want to do something with TouchDesigner, I open it and I don't really know where to go. I'm like, okay, what am I doing here? And then yeah, most of the time it doesn't really lead anywhere, and I should just close it again and come back when I'm inspired. But or when I have an idea of what I want to do. But that's like most often the case is, hey, I want to, I don't know. I had a thought under the shower and was like, hey, this could work. Let's try that out. And so I opened TouchDesigner with already knowing where I want to go.
All right, I think we've worked through the current questions, so keep them coming.
So there has been a question very far up in the chat that we somehow skipped, I think. It was pretty, it was about a tutorial, a specific tutorial you had.
Ah, okay, yeah, right, yeah. How would you make this audio reactive? I do have a tutorial on that, like make anything audio reactive, and I honestly I can't give a better answer than that tutorial, because I feel like that explains a lot. I mean, in the end, you can make it, it's always a similar process making your project audio reactive, and I think I there's a lot of, I can just link that. Yeah, in the end, you just have like you just create your techniques once, and you can use them for basically any project. So I'll just share that. Do you have another answer for that, Yusuf?
No, I must say, I like doing something audio reactive in a meaningful way is always tough. I mean, you can also just take the bass and make something move based on that. But so maybe something I could say to that is that I heard from a bunch of people who are really experienced with doing audio reactive stuff, is that they over time realize that it's most interesting if the connection between visuals and audio is not too obvious. Because if you have like the beat, and every time the beat hits, something reacts to that, the human brain gets bored of that quite quickly because it understands right away what's happening. So if you want to do a more sophisticated and interesting audio reaction, maybe that can be more subtle, and but finding that reasonable, like meaningful audio reaction is tough for sure. Like I'm struggling with exactly that with my current flocking system, where I'm like very happy with how it works and everything, but I would love to have a good audio reaction, but I haven't found the way yet to make it interesting.
Yeah, I totally agree on that. In the beginning, you're like very happy when it's almost literal translation, and at some point yeah, I also prefer it if it's a lot subtler, and also sometimes the brain automatically makes things sort of seem audio reactive. So it doesn't have to be overt at all. But yeah, the person is writing, I'm using MIDI. Well, in the end, it's not much of a different workflow. You can either use MIDI or MIDI controls to, like in the same way that I'm doing in that video, to manipulate parameters, or you can do MIDI visualizations if you're working with a MIDI keyboard, for example. I also have videos in that. There's other people's videos. And then you could just composite that or something. Yeah. I think that's all I can say.
And then next maybe is Netfunk asking about interactive projects installations involving Azure Kinects and piping that data into Unity or Unreal Engine. I have earlier this year started to learn some Unreal Engine. Actually, also getting back to what I said before, that I'm not really interested in V4 or Notch. I'm actually interested in Unreal Engine because it's just it's I would say it's a completely it's very different. It's also obviously a different approach and tries to be a different kind of software, but they just have an extremely sophisticated real-time rendering system, and that's what was interesting for a specific installation I was working on. So I actually ended up getting some real-time input data in Touch and like yeah, worked on that data in Touch and then sent the result to Unreal Engine. And I did that by using the Touch engine inside of Unreal Engine. I don't know, like that from maybe you can get more specific on your question because like are there any like yeah, I don't know what I should share about that. So
But yeah, I would also say the same thing about Touch Engine, right? You can build your components in TouchDesigner and then implement that as like via the Touch Engine, right, in Unreal. But I personally haven't tried it.
What Torin is saying in the chat as well. So OC is a great way to do that, or WebSockets, and also actually I think Spout works as well, but I had some jitters in there.
Right. Any other questions? Typing. Do you have experience using Max MSP? No. I have experience with Ableton. Literally just Ableton, no Max or anything. TD Ableton, but yeah. No Max MSP, and I don't think I will. If I learn another tool, it would be Unreal or Houdini as well. And kind of Stable Diffusion now in connection with Touch, but that's still TouchDesigner sort of.
Yeah, and also coming like back to Unreal Engine, I because Netfunk is getting a little bit more specific. Yeah, I also was kind of, it was a little bit weird because I'm also not profound in Unreal Engine. It was weird to get or felt a little bit unintuitive how to get the data in and out between Touch Engine and Unreal Engine. But I think that should be more intuitive now that they released the new TouchDesigner, Touch Engine bridge, like Touch Engine for Unreal Engine. But I haven't tested that. But I think it's more intuitive now.
Yeah, what Torrent is writing here is generally a problem sometimes. So I think it's Windows. I don't know if it's the same on Mac, but yeah, that there's GPU priority to just one application that is kind of active. I've had that problem as well. Are there any tutorials for real-time visual shows? I'm sure of it. I think there's like some really good ones on the TouchDesigner YouTube, like from some kind of summit. Let me find that. Yeah, something like this one.
So maybe also next question, what is the use of Unreal Engine or not in relation to TouchDesigner? So for my specific project, I can only speak about that. Unreal Engine is definitely capable of things that TouchDesigner is not capable of. For example, photorealistic real-time rendering to some extent. So I wanted to use Unreal Engine, but then in Unreal Engine, for example, if you want to get data in from a Kinect camera or any kind of sensory, even just audio, it's not as easy, especially not as easy as in TouchDesigner, especially if you're so used to TouchDesigner. So Touch Engine allows you to build whatever kind of functionality inside of TouchDesigner and save it as a tox and load it as a functionality into Unreal Engine. So it can just allow you to dig closer to your workflow that you're used to get data in and out. So
I think one of the main reasons why people are using Notch or Unreal instead of Touch is the rendering quality, because that's still not perfect in TouchDesigner, and both the other software have amazing real-time renderings. I mean, obviously, especially Unreal is just crazy at this point. So I think that that's a huge reason why people go there. Then also their particle systems and stuff are very, very sophisticated. I think that's where the other softwares are like better, amongst other things. Yeah, I haven't used both. Yeah, there's a question about Max.
I don't know what the jitter tutorials are. Should be quite lackluster. I don't know that word either. To be. Are there any projects that you find inspiring? I don't really understand the question, to be honest.
Well, so for background, jitter.
Ah, sorry, it's not JP. I thought it's Joseph Phelps, but it's probably two words. JP.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I think that's just misspelling. So Jitter is a video engine of Max. So it never really took off, I suppose, in the way that TouchDesigner and other visual programs did. But the beauty of it is that you can have everything under one logic and one context. You have like you process all your audio with the same building blocks, and then you have jitter. Um, and the capacities of it are quite big as well. I mean, you can do OpenGL with it. You can do a lot of rendering. You just have to use the logic of Max to do that. A lot of operations as well. Inspiring projects. It's a good question. No, that's a short answer. I mean, Cycling 74 is releasing very often interesting projects, but because Max and Jitter is so kind of embedded, you can find it in many art installations, and but not necessarily open up. It's hard to share a project. Actually, it's not fully true. There's some people have switched to TouchDesigner recently, but they started with Max and Jitter. And there's already plenty of things you can do. It might not be as optimized as TouchDesigner, if I understand correctly, in terms of performance. I think for a large display, 4K display, if you want to go to a live show, you might run into performance hurdles with Jitter. I will think about interesting tutorials and put them in the chat if I find an answer. That disappear now.
So Joseph, the next question is more for you, I guess. If we have any tutorials on particle clouds and free axes, GLSO.
I was just searching on the side if I would find any. To be honest, I've barely watched any tutorials, so I don't know that many JSL tutorials for TouchDesigner because I kind of came from that side, so I do know JSL so well that I'm not really watching that many tutorials. But maybe there's someone else in the chat who can share a great tutorial on GLSL in 3 axes. If you don't find any, you could check out the summer course I just gave at the TouchDesigner at the Node Institute. So I just gave a GLSL lecture where we also did GLSL particles in 3 axes. So maybe that's something you could look into.
And then there's a question: are you just pre-building functions in Touch and can directly implement them into Unreal or Notch engine afterwards? Are there any tutorials that you would recommend getting started? I've just shared a video on that. And they also the interactive immersive HQ. I think they did like a workshop a while ago though, so it's not like super up to date. But I also started that at some point, so I think that would still be a good way to get started. Yeah, I think the way the Touch engine works generally is like you can build tox files, you can build components inside of TouchDesigner, and then basically implement them in other software like Notch and Unreal, and then without having to run TouchDesigner itself, but basically just like a part of TouchDesigner kind of running and in that software, the way I understand it. Yes. Do you think a university degree in media arts is going to be any more useful than those courses that the Node institution, for example, create? If so, which universities, colleges in Europe do you suggest? I get that question a lot, actually, like suggestions for universities. I don't know many. I myself was at SOPA in Berlin, School of Popular Arts, but it's like a private one, and was interaction design, so not technically TouchDesigner related. I don't know. There's a few ones now that do integrate TouchDesigner, but still very rare. And in my experience, it doesn't even matter if you have any like degrees. Don't matter at all in this field. Like it only matters if you have skills and a good sense for aesthetics or whatever, depending on use case. But I don't think it matters. But it's still like, obviously it's good to have. I'm still glad I studied, and because I got in, like I saw a lot of things that also I didn't want to do. And yeah, you get a lot of contacts and stuff. And I think I started TouchDesigner through the university, even though it wasn't actually taught there. So it can definitely help, but necessary, no.
I think I would generally say you won't learn any software well by learning it through university. I would say whatever kind of software you want to learn, you learn it because you want to learn it. It just takes time, so you will need to do it more than the university would ask you for in a single 1 semester course or whatever. So you will always need to have the motivation to learn it on your own and sit down after work or after school and actually go into it and learn it. And I haven't really seen a sophisticated university program on TouchDesigner. I'm sure I have a feeling that some universities are pushing towards this. But honestly, I feel like the resources that are available online for TouchDesigner are immense and incredibly good. So there are so many good tutorials that you can teach yourself on. But then I think there are two different kinds of learners. You kind of need to be an autodidact, or how you say, you need to be a self-learner to do it via tutorials. Maybe you need someone to actually like interact with you to get there, and then maybe it helps to either do some live workshops or actually go to your university, because you also have the peer group. And then would you say you would study something that includes TouchDesigner to understand in what context TouchDesigner can be used? And yeah, I mean, there's such a big world to explore and so many things to talk about, and so many things to learn and so many things to take away from that. But I would first of all agree with Bileam that the degree is not necessarily what would like get you employed afterwards, but the things you learn along that. And I would say it's not the hardware, the hard skills on the software, but all the ideas you get from it and all the knowledge.
Yeah, it can be a good like kind of way to have projects as well to get started on also non-commercial projects. And then what I did in my design studies, at some point I just pushed TouchDesigner into everything, just telling my teachers I'm just gonna do everything with TouchDesigner. And also my bachelor degree, like the final thesis, I also did with TouchDesigner, so it can be a good kind of surrounding to get started, I guess. But you'll have to do it yourself in the end usually. Okay, so next one in TouchDesigner, is there a simple way to set presets? For instance, if I have customized parameters for my project, can I set all these parameters into a component rather than place them individually into a constant shop, for example? Yes, absolutely. There's custom parameters, so you can build all of your own components. You can create a base, and yeah, then just create all of your custom parameters. I also have a video on that. It's kind of old though. Not, yeah, I might have to update that. But I do that a lot now. And then also in the palette, you can save these very easily, just dragging them into your components. And then no need to create everything again all the time. Like I actually, yeah, at this point I have a rather extensive list of pre-made Tox files in my palette that I can just drag in, which is very, very useful. And then there's also preset systems by Dan, which was I think already mentioned here, a function store. Yeah, he just shared that. Yeah. And also there's the OLED preset thing. And I saw that just earlier. Yeah, it was just updated today, I think. Preset manager that was also built by Alpha Moonbase, and share that as well. So there's a lot of approaches to this. But I think mainly what it sounds like, what you're looking for is custom parameters. So just Google that.
Yeah, that's my question.
Yeah.
So with like the custom parameters, if I've got multiple like pages, say 5 pages, if I'm playing around like in the base from outside the project, like I guess what I meant was, is there either like someone else has made where every parameter at that point be saved in time, so that when I change it and experiment more, I can just like revert back to those parameters, if that makes sense?
Yes, I know what you're asking, and there's a parameter chop.
Okay.
And that I think you can drag whatever component on it, and it will expose the parameters from that and their current values. And then you can connect a constant shop to that, and the constant shop has a snap parameter that will just save the current input. So that way you can like immediately just save out the current state of the parameters of a component every time. It's interesting.
And also the preset manager I just shared, I think that's kind of doing the same thing. In the end, it's a bit more complicated though, but yeah. And I that's also
actually, I think that's something a lot of people are actually like, that's useful for a lot of people.
And it's not too easy to build. I also tried to build that for algorithm, and yeah, building your own preset system isn't too easy, I noticed. Oh yeah, but there's a few out there.
Also, quick answer to Sofo's question: any tips on using analog synthesizers in TD workflow? No, I don't have any experience with it.
No, me neither. So I guess that's all we can say. Will there be any live workshops, meetups, or sessions from you in the future, maybe in the Netherlands? Well, I hope so. There's nothing planned yet, but that's something I've been wanting to do for a while. Usually in Berlin though. But it doesn't matter that much. And Netherlands isn't far. But yeah, there's nothing planned. But I personally prefer in-person meetups and workshops and stuff like a ton. It's so much nicer, in my experience, to work with people in person. And also, I think we're all kind of sick of online stuff since the pandemic. So I'm thinking about it, and I do kind of want to do something regular here, even though we already have the roundtable, but more like in a smaller way, maybe, in like a coding jam kind of thing. Just I think that still exists here in Berlin, like creative coding jam once a month, which is cool. People can meet up from different backgrounds and just work on a project for a day. Yeah, I'll keep you updated.
Like I think I just missed an event in the Netherlands that was mainly organized by FX. No, not by how are they called again?
YFX Lab.
YFX. Thank you, YFX. Yes, beautiful. Yeah,
Right.
they just had a great event there. I wasn't there, but I missed it.
Same.
If you want to attend a live community meeting in the Netherlands, I would recommend to reach out to YFX Studios because they know how to do they know all the people, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. They're my favorite TouchDesigner people. Most impressive work. So, there's
Are
another
there any
question.
on
I'm
YouTube maybe?
No, there's one here. I'm new to this industry and trying to get my foot in the door. Do you recommend anything getting started? I live in New York and I'm curious how to market myself or just shadow others in their gigs. Yeah, the thing is, I have this kind of weird special position that I'm sort of, yeah, I've got all of these tutorials and stuff, so I don't need to. I don't know, I don't have the standard way of how I got professional or whatever. Um, and it's very hard for me to answer, but I think generally it's that thing I think we kind of mentioned already, but generally I always say like really write to people, like all kinds of people. Do something maybe every day or every week, so you're building up a portfolio of your aesthetic and maybe just doing some experiments at home also in physical space so people can see what you're doing and then reach out to people like really like all kinds of artists, also musicians, tag musicians on Instagram and stuff, and then I've had a lot of like meetings or just generally yeah good connections just by me or friends of mine even like tagging other people on Instagram just start to get into a conversation with them. So I think that's one of the most important things. And then if you do see there's any meetups, then definitely go always everywhere and connect with people.
Yeah. I also think that it helps in it's great to have some kind of portfolio to that like it would be optimal if people stumble over it by themselves. Maybe if because you manage to build up an Instagram that has a specific reach or whatever, or just a website you have for yourself that you can point people towards if you meet them or if you want to like, hey, look at what I'm doing, because that's definitely important to be able to quickly convey what you're doing.
Yeah,
And also what Bileam just said, get in touch with people in real life. I think that helps so much. Actually, like attend community meetings.
I think New York should
I
be
don't know. In New
another.
York, yeah, in New York there are some people to meet.
Okay, out of questions for now. By the way, are you using any AI tools at all, Joseph?
No, barely. I briefly used AI ChatGPT the other day to have some Python script written for me for Discord web hooks or something because like I can write Python, but I just didn't know the
Syntax.
Discord API and was the easiest to just ask ChatGPT on that, and it worked perfectly fine. But that was just out of laziness, I guess. But otherwise, I'm not too interested. Like I know I'm also extremely interested with what's happening, what is developing on that side. But I think for me, it's kind of a black box,
Mm-hmm.
and that's so you just give something to it and you get a result. But I would be more interested in it if I could actually understand or understand what
Mm-hmm.
is happening in there. But it's kind of the nature of AI that you don't really get to understand that. I would be more interested to train a little AI myself for one
Mm-hmm.
specific reason and see where I can push that. But no. Nice. There's going to be a New York TD meetup hosted by Immersive HQ soon.
Right, yeah, Crystal is in New York now, so probably doing it. Crystal Joe. Yeah. I think originally Marcus from Derivative was set to join us, unfortunately. Yeah. Do you have any experience using TouchDesigner for physical structures? The only kind of physical structure I was working on was just kind of hanging in like a DMX lights over a stage in a theater. Gladly that was already, everything was kind of already built physically, because there was like, that looked like a lot of pain to set up, and I just kind of had to work on the software side of things. So I actually built them like a little tool. So DMX was kind of the only thing, but I haven't worked that much with kinetics or anything.
Me neither, unfortunately.
Only projections, of course, but also not like sophisticated mapping. Just more basic, just projection. But yeah, TouchDesigner is definitely the perfect tool for that. I also really want to get into lasers. They also, like in the last roundtable here in Berlin, they announced that they have updated quite a bit for the laser chop, as well as some other cool things. So yeah, I want to get a laser. I'm going to Hamburg and Berlin in September. Could you recommend some places, shows, or meetups around the first 2 weeks of the month? Thank you for your tutorials. You're very welcome. And greetings from Berlin to Mexico. First,
I didn't read it all the way through. I already answered that you should attend the Node Institute roundtable, but I fear it's not in the first 2 weeks, right?
I guess so, yeah. Yeah, the node meetups, they're always at the end, right? At the end of the month. But I think the August, they don't have an event anyways. But it's September. Yeah, I don't know. And then generally there's always the what's it called? The Summer Lights thing, Dark Matter. It's always a good place to like a permanent installation completely made with TouchDesigner by White Void. I think that's kind of the classic. And then there's the Lighthouse, and the sort of newly, like a few months opened place called Chroma with K, like this. Well, I was at the opening, and there's definitely some really interesting installations. It's also, I don't think it's all done with touch, but it's like interactive, immersive installations, and like a pretty cool place and space to see. And yeah, they're actually, like Tundra is actually, they have one installation there at Chroma, funnily enough. So yes, I'm familiar with their work. I guess you are too, Joseph.
Not to my knowledge. Maybe I've seen their works, but I was not aware of their name. Checking it out right now. Also, actually, interesting question. Where's the best forum or community to chat with TouchDesigner users for beginners to ask questions? I remember when I was beginning to learn TouchDesigner, that was the TouchDesigner help group on Facebook, but I'm not on Facebook since years. And I don't know if that group is still active. I know that
it is, yeah. I'm also not active on it, but it's still active, I think.
Okay, but also I must say the forum has been great for that as well lately. So whenever I have a question, actually towards the actual team of touch designers, because I run into some kind of bug or whatever, or I have really a question, the touch designer forum itself on derivative.ca is really responsive, both from the community and the touch designer team.
Yeah, and of course the Discord, the touch designer Discord. There's like a link here. It's called, right. 1 second. But yeah, that's really helpful as well. And then I also have my Discord for Patreons. If you do want to pay a bit monthly, then you can go in that server, and there we also have a help room, and there's a lot of people answering questions, so that can work nicely. And I also do like sort of a meetup like this once a month, just with patrons. It's usually like 5 to 10 people, and more casual and just chatting freely. So that can also be, that's always fun as well. Yeah, I think that's kind of it.
I want to join. Now that you talked about it in that way, I want to join.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's very, yeah, very very casual and just almost like just a friend group coming together. Great people in this community, I've got to say. Probably one of the best aspects about TouchDesigner.
For sure.
Okay. Any more questions? And by the way, you're still like very much allowed to just turn on your mic and camera and talk that way. Do you have any questions, Joseph?
What have you been struggling with lately in TouchDesigner? Like, what was the last thing where you just didn't know how to do it in TouchDesigner?
Oh man, I don't know. What I'm mostly struggling with right now is like having sort of a rhythm, but that's not exactly TouchDesigner related, but really like I don't know. I'm still like struggling with more like the surrounding, like when do I work and like I don't know. Do you have set times where you work in Touch? Yeah, no.
No.
That's awesome. It's like it's so messy for me, and that sometimes it's super nice, and it's a great privilege to be so flexible, and that they can work anytime from anywhere. But it's also a challenge sometimes.
The pros and cons of making your hobby to your
Yeah.
to your job also. Yeah. Yeah, I also don't have any rhythm. Yeah, maybe getting more organized is like a big struggle, but I feel like it's getting better anyway. And Torian is sharing that he's struggling, or like not struggling, but learning about atomics, I guess. And that's that would also be maybe my own answer to that, is that I lately learned, like, this is super GLSL specific, and also like I guess high level GLSL, but learning about atomic operations in GLSL and image atomic operations has been extremely like challenging, but now that I understood it all, extremely rewarding because it unlocks so many new things I want to work.
I haven't even heard that, so about it.
Yeah. It basically allows you, because like GLSL is always about parallelization to some extent, like doing stuff in parallel, and atomics kind of break that, as in they guarantee you that certain things are not necessarily happening in a specific order, but they are all happening for sure, like one after the other. You don't know necessarily the order, but you know that one after the other is going to happen, and that allows you to do certain stuff.
I see.
Which is powerful, but yeah.
Any more questions in the chat?
Someone is typing.
Do you ever use timeline or trigger audiovisual events, actions in certain moments within the project? I have done that, working on music videos mostly. I cannot recommend using the animation comp. It's a pain in the but I don't know. There is also an approach with like Ableton triggering things. For live events, like installations, I haven't really used the timeline much. I'm also using it again now for Stable Diffusion. That's very very important. Check out my latest tutorial on that. I have like basically an independent timeline which just like runs frame by frame whenever Stable Diffusion is done with the frame and sends signal, and so like the independent timeline goes to the next step. That's like one of the most sort of extensive ways I've used timelines, apart from just using the animation comp and then using keyframe animation mostly music videos. But I'm not gonna do that again. I did 2 music videos that way, and that was enough. Never again. Yeah, but it can be great. But like one thing where I've got to say where Notch is really good at it was that timeline thing. That was quite sexy the way they handled that. I wish we had something as extensive as that in Touch. Something they announced, which will be now included in the experimental version in the next one, is that they now have this time code shop and everything is time code based. So that's going to be interesting as well. Not sure how much that is related to the timeline itself, but it's generally working with like, yeah, with everything being based on the same time code. I think it's gonna be cool. Does it ask of individual too much time to set all points on timeline? What do you mean? Like for the animation comp? I don't know, but yeah, it takes a long time and it works, but it's just a pain. And they're also aware of that, but it's not gonna, yeah, it's not gonna be changed soon, I think. When you record the tutorial that is covering a new topic or technique, how do you research beforehand? It, as I already kind of said, that process, generally the way I work is kind of messy, so I don't have like one approach I use. The way tutorials kind of evolve is a very organic process where I just kind of work on things either for clients, for workshops, or just for myself for fun, exploring new stuff. And then at some point I think, okay, I could make this into a tutorial, and then obviously I look for other people if they already made a tutorial on it. And then sometimes I obviously have to Google some topics and to get deeper into it and understand it. But it's, yeah, the research is mostly, I mean, I don't cover that much of like theoretical things, so research is mostly, yeah, like documentation of TouchDesigner, my own explorations, and obviously watching other tutorials. Have you ever had a fatal error in TouchDesigner in a live performance? What did you do? With TouchDesigner, I don't think I did so far. Yeah, I did actually. Yeah, in the lighthouse here in Berlin where I used my tool algorithm, it just went blank, and just I had to restart it. Luckily everything was very quickly back to working, but there's honestly not too much you can do. I also remember having a blue screen back in the day before TouchDesigner with Resolume and Ableton back then. It was really bad. So I had 2 blue screens that day, and the first one was like, I don't know, okay, I'm back like after 2 minutes, and the second one took like 10 or 15 minutes to get back. And obviously like people kind of left at that point. It was all no good. I don't have much advice on what you can do. Yeah, I guess running parallel computers could be one thing, but yeah. For me though, like I've got to say, TouchDesigner is probably one of the most stable softwares I've used. Not necessarily when you create something that it does crash sometimes, but really like having live performances. It's usually very stable in my experience. You always just keep in mind that something won't work. That's also my experience with installations. In the end, it does, but there's always some kind of hassle. But yeah, Joseph?
No, I don't recall any major hiccups either. Um, I mean, I once gave a workshop and realized that the workshop files I prepared didn't work on Mac, and half the class had Macs. So that was annoying, but that was just my fault. It was not TouchDesigner crashing. It was just not well prepared. I should have checked that.
Yeah, just make sure you don't use, like new versions or especially new experimental versions right before your gig or something. Make sure that you use the version that you created the project with. I think it's important. Joined a bit late. Do you have any general advice for getting started with TouchDesigner when it comes to comparing yourself to others? I feel like I'm starting late at my age. I don't know if a career with interactive art is possible or not. It's too late. I wouldn't say it's too late at all. Like, I don't know how old you are, but I wouldn't say any age is too late to learn this. It really depends on what you're already doing. If you want to do full-time TouchDesigner, that's obviously not going to be easy. Generally getting started, we've already kind of mentioned that earlier. There's beginner courses from me and other people, and there's now, check the link somewhere higher up in the beginning. It's like learn.derivative.ca. It's where you can get started. Comparing yourself to others, it's something you generally, shouldn't do too much. But especially with TouchDesigner, there's so many different focuses, whatever, for and people with different backgrounds. So just find out whatever focus you want to have and what skill set you bring to TouchDesigner, and no need to compare. Some are really good at programming and building tools for themselves and others, and some are really focused on the music or audio or visual side of things. So yeah.
Yeah, and also I'm sure. So they are 42. I'm sure you did something interesting beforehand until now, and as long as you kind of maybe incorporate whatever you take away from what you've done so far into your work with TouchDesigner and do something maybe unique because of that, or something. If you just, yeah, I'm sure you will bring something interesting to the table just because of your experience with what you've done so far. So everybody's journey is different. So definitely,
Exactly.
yeah, worth a try.
Oh, well, that's interesting. A new course. Nice. That looks really good. Thanks for sharing that. All right.
Nice website.
I'm just going to share that on YouTube. Yeah, cool. It's so nice to see that there's so many people now doing tutorials, because when I started, it felt like, I don't know, 5 people that I could watch tutorials from, mostly Matthew Reagan and Interactive Immersive, which were great and still are great resources, but it's just like so many people getting into it now. It's lovely.
Yeah, and just looking over, it seems like he's answering some interesting questions, like why would we use TouchDesigner over other options that we, yeah, I don't know. It looks like he's probably also answering a lot of interesting questions.
Should invite him. Yeah, no, those tutorials are really lovely. Unfortunately, he's not doing a lot. I think he's also working a lot on his own installations. I saw on Instagram. But yeah, he's got a really nice style of making tutorials. Yeah, no one's image as well, but he's also stopped recording them like for like a year now, I think. So too bad. Any recommendations on systems to learning TouchDesigner? Should I watch tutorials and then try to recreate it with memory? With no memory, I don't think so, but definitely, obviously, watching tutorials, like as many as you can. But one thing I really did a lot and still do a lot, I think, which is great, is to imitate other people's artworks, which might sound weird first, but just try to create something that you see on the web or wherever place you go, and then you can still give it your own aesthetic and develop it further, but it can be a good starting point. I think that's always a good place to start. Yeah. Well, I didn't have a system to learn it. I just, yeah, as I said earlier, just keep at it. I think especially in the beginning, if you take breaks of like a month or something, you're gonna forget a lot. So at this point, not anymore, but especially in the beginning, for me, it was like, you have to keep at it. Yeah, and reverse engineer projects also good. Yeah. Is it possible to create music or combine it in any way with TouchDesigner? Yes. So I'm not sure exactly what you mean, but like you can, if you can create music in TouchDesigner. I actually recently had held a workshop on data sonification in TouchDesigner. I can quickly share that here. So you can work with VSTs and you can send data to Ableton. So you can actually create sounds through TouchDesigner, not directly, but using external tools like VSTs. And then audio visualization, I'm not going to get into that. That's a huge topic and a huge reason for many people to use TouchDesigner. So just check out tutorials on YouTube on audio visualization and reaction.
Sorry, I don't really know like how long this is like planned to be
We
going
we
on.
can we can come to a close soon.
Yeah, maybe you can have another bunch of questions, but I kind of need to
Yeah,
um,
sure.
get other things going.
Yeah,
So
maybe.
yeah,
Yeah, just ask your last questions now,
I
maybe
think
another
it's,
5 minutes, and yeah, totally. It's been going on for a while. How long before you felt confident working with TouchDesigner and freely creating? And definitely still in the stage of learning what each operator does, etc. As I mentioned earlier, for me it was like I was using a lot of the tools and techniques and following other people without understanding it for a long time, and it took me a while till I really, really deeply understood TouchDesigner. Confident, I don't know, maybe like a year or two for in my case, to say something more concrete. Working with like on projects and commissions and stuff, I did quite early. I had my, I don't know if that's early, but like my first really big project was after maybe half or like half a year, or 3/4 of a year after I started. And I think what a huge part of being an artist in this kind of field, in many fields, is that you learn while you're doing, and then you say yes to a project and you learn what you have to do in a project. And like I've learned a lot by doing that and by doing tutorials as well. So yeah, I don't know, feeling confident is probably very individual, but yeah. What do you say?
yeah, I just had this like saying in my head that goes somewhere along the lines of if you feel comfortable, you are probably going also like you won't and learn anything new. So
Mm-hmm.
I think I definitely like when I started doing jobs, like definitely my first job that wasn't even yet connected to TouchDesigner, but Houdini, because in the very beginning I first learned a little bit of Houdini. I had no clue what I was doing, but someone asked me to generate some visuals, and I was just open about like where I am, and he was like, "Sounds good, let's
Mm-hmm.
try to do this together." And I kind of was able to learn while I was working on it, and I think that always, yeah, that's an extremely good setting for learning stuff because in the end, you learn also like TouchDesigner because you either come up with your own projects you want to realize and learn while being challenged, or maybe even better if you have a project for someone else, so you have also maybe peer pressure or generally pressure to actually achieve it, and then
Mm-hmm.
you will hopefully find solutions and just ask people about it and get
Yeah.
there. So, but how long did you, before you felt confident working with TouchDesigner, really creating? I think
When did you start?
I started 2018, but like
Mm.
the first year or so, I only wrote GLSL within TouchDesigner,
Mm.
and then I discovered that they are like all the functionalities TouchDesigner has. So that was probably a unique approach to it. So I don't know. I'm still meeting other people working with TouchDesigner, and I'm like, oh, you
Yeah.
can do that in TouchDesigner.
Mm-hmm.
That's great, and that's like I should have done that if I'm like a TouchDesigner developer or whatever. But um, yeah, I don't know. Maybe if you, yeah, maybe 1.5 years, 2 years until I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, I know how to use TouchDesigner properly.
Same here, yeah. But there's still a lot of areas for me that are like, what the hell is happening? So
I have no
it's
clue about the whole web thing and stuff.
yeah,
So
exactly.
no way.
There's so many parts to it that's hard to say, but yeah, I also feel like at some point you just get the general way it works, and then you can achieve a lot even without asking other people at some point. Um, yeah, so for TouchDesigner usage in installation, there's often a lot of hardware like LED walls, lasers, projectors, and other things. Is it hard to get into the hardware stuff, and would you recommend to buy stuff like this to see how it works, or is it rather easy to connect TouchDesigner to these? I mean, TouchDesigner is really made for this kind of stuff, so I would say it's quite easy to connect, especially to LED walls and projectors. It's very easy. Lasers, it's also fairly easy. I haven't really tried that, but there is a laser shop, and there's a lot of people, more and more, that have used lasers. You can also check out the TouchDesigner Meetup that we've had about that. So I generally would say it's easy to do, but obviously it's always good to have your own devices to try things on, especially like sensors, like Arduino and stuff. It's good and also just fun to mess around with and have a projector yourself and stuff to see what it feels like as well. But generally, yes, I would say yes, it's easy to connect.
I would jump on that, and also like yes, it's great to have stuff like this. I also quite early on got myself a MIDI controller because
Mm-hmm.
it's just more tangible to control any kind of parameters. But I also bought a bunch of stuff along the lines just because I was like, yeah, I want to have a Connect Azure.
Yeah.
That was not worth buying it because it's so easy to hook it up, and I wasn't really interested to actually play around with it myself that much. And whenever I had a project that included working with the Kinect Azure or any kind of Kinect, people would like supply me with it. So you also, I don't know. I know a lot of people who are just gearheads and they want to have all this stuff, but
Mm.
in the end they don't really like. It's often also not really reasonable to actually get them before you really need them. Um,
Okay.
next question: would you recommend purchasing TouchDesigner software for a beginner? I would say not until you need to get more resolution than TouchDesigner
Yeah.
supplies you with, like the free version. There's no reason to do this.
Free version is actually amazing in TouchDesigner. You can do pretty much anything that you need to as a beginner, or everything that you need to as a beginner. And yeah, as soon as you make money with it or have actual shows, then you should buy it for sure. But yeah, it's good to start with the free version.
Yeah, good question also by JB. Any particular requests for topics of future meetups? Maybe, yeah, also interested. Maybe also opening this up again, like this is an ask me anything question session. I feel like there's been a lot of questions that are kind of just like, hey, can this be done in TouchDesigner and stuff? And I'm like always happy to chat about all the possibilities with TouchDesigner, but maybe a particular topic of something you're interested to learn about.
Yeah, so for future meetups as well, we're always looking for both topics and speakers. So you can always just reach out to me or JP or yeah, Music Tech Space in general or TouchDesigner, whoever, and ask if we or yeah, share what you want to share. I'm very happy to have you. Yeah, and I think we can let the people write now, and then after that, we can bring it to an end. As I said in the beginning, I can share that here right away. We're recording this and streaming it on YouTube, so you can rewatch it if you missed parts. I would love to see actual projects or installations you have been hired to create. I think that would be inspiring. Yeah, I can. Wait a second. I'm not sure if I want to go too deeply into that now. I think I'm just going to be lazy and share my website. Um, for future meetings. Yeah, I'm still going to share my website. Yeah, that's a good one. People, but I mean, yeah.
My website didn't got recognized as a hyperlink, but yeah, it's there. Yeah, also my website shows some projects, but they are definitely not up to date. But interesting to actually, yeah, talk, maybe actually like a meeting talking about the process of, I actually just lately had a meeting, right?
And jobs
In
and
tech
freelancing, yeah.
about freelancing.
That's also on the Music Hackspace YouTube channel. That yeah, I mean we had like we're also Torren was currently also in this chat, and then Crystal and Dan and somebody else. You? No, it wasn't you. But yeah, we're like
But I love that the stuff that pays is usually not the most fun stuff. Someone writes in the chat.
yeah,
Yeah.
I guess depends really.
If you're lucky, there can actually be good stuff, but also sometimes you just have a money job, I guess.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for joining, everybody. Always very fun
Yeah.
to talk to you guys. Right, Nima was also there. Yeah, sorry, Nima. Yeah, that was a really good session. You can watch that on YouTube. Right. So thank you so much, Joseph, for joining as well and answering questions. It's a really fun sort of way of doing this. It's a good format, I would say. So we might do that again. But yeah, as I said, feel free to write me or JB any topics that you would like to see on the meetups, or if you want to present. And yeah, I'll see you sometime next month, I guess.
Awesome. And also, like from my side, if you have any questions that pop up later, feel free to write me. I think the easiest way is probably via my Instagram and just write me a DM there if you have like any questions about what I'm working on and stuff. I'm always happy to chat about it.
Cool. Then I wish you all a lovely weekend. Instagram, yeah, share your Instagram, Joseph.
I don't know if I need to put this Instagram. How is it not doing
I think
hyperlink?
only with like HTTP or HTTPS, I don't know. There we go. Cool. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining and see you in the next one.
Cheers. Bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye, guys.
See you.
Thanks,
Thank
man.
you. Yeah, sure.